Greetings, folks. This is DC Investing. I'm talking about topics to help people reach financial independence. Today, I'm going to try a different format. I'm going to be more technical in an analysis and show a spreadsheet snippet that shows how you could potentially retire in a 10-year time frame. Now, the hypothetical person that I want to talk about today is age 45. They're in a career that they have been working at for 15 years. Let's say they started at age 30, they're now age 45. They have an annual salary of $135,000. So you have to assume this is a professional person of some kind, maybe an engineer or software developer or another professional of some kind. So they're kind of midway through their career and they want to retire in 10 years' time, which is at the age of 55. So, kind of a little background here. They have been saving into a 401k, basically just kind of the minimum of, say, a 6% rate over the past 15 years. Their company has been matching them, and the starting salary or starting 401k balance, I'm going to put in column D, they have $150,000 that they've saved up over the past 15 years of their working between what they saved and the compounding. So that's what they're going to start out with. And then we're going to assume that they're going to invest in something that compounds at a rate of 7.5%. Now, most choices within a 401k plan are kind of tied to, say, the S&P 500. You don't have a lot of choices, but if you are invested in a S&P 500 fund, that's been compounding at a rate above 10% for the past decade. But I just put 7.5%. We have no idea what it's going to be. And so, kind of in the columns A through D, the first one I'm going to put the age. So, you're starting at age 45 and you're going to go to 54 as the end year because in year 55, you're going to retire. And you're planning on using the rule of 55 as part of your retirement planning. And so, the rule of 55 says if you're working at an employer that you currently have your 401k plan in, then in the year you turn 55, you can start taking withdrawals from that 401k plan without the 10% penalty. So if you happen to switch jobs during this time, just move your 401k plan from your old job to your new job. And as long as your entire balance sits with the workplace where you're retiring from, then you can start to remove funds from that 401k. So, you haven't been a very good saver until the age of 45, and you say, I want to get out of this rat race earlier than normal. I want to retire at age 55. So you're going to start at age 45 to maximize your 401k contribution. So in 2025, your maximum is 23,500. So for the next 10 years, I've added a small growth rate into this amount, and that growth rate, because they do continue to increase um, your tax rate over this long time, or I mean the amount you contribute. So I assume it's going to grow by 1%. So the first year it's 23,500. The next year you can put 23,735, and they may not increase it for one particular year, but I'm just assuming that growth is going to happen over a 1% over the 10-year time period. So by the time you're 54, you assume that you're going to be able to contribute $32,810 when you um, after that 10-year time frame. So that slowly goes up. It's going to every year you're going to compound at 7.5% on those contributions. It's not exactly on the formula. So really, the previous year, getting that 23,500 into it would end up with 1762.50. But just for the sake of this, assume that you made that whole contribution on day one. It your rate of return is $1,700. So at the end of that year, you now have the 23,500 plus 172 plus your $150,000 starting rate. So in column D, you have $186,512. And then that column going down every year, you're going to add what you had the previous year onto your new contribution. Every year, it's going to grow by that 7.5%. So at the end of 10 years, where you're going to end up with in your 401k plan is $724,000, 322 cents. So again, this takes your 150,000 that you start with, you grow that amount every year, and you add your yearly contribution to it. You are maxing out your 401k contribution. When you do this, you get a great tax cut on this amount. You're either getting the 12% tax rate, or it's even possible that you're slightly pushing into the 22% tax bracket. So you're saving taxes, it's going into your 401k plan, and at the age 55, you got $725,000 or 724,000 in that account. So notice in column 8, there's a highlighted part. That's when your catch up can start. When you turn age 50, you can put in more money into your 401k plan. It's $7,500 right now. On that year 50, I think there's a slightly more than that amount that I put into there because the amounts will go up. And so that's the catch up. Notice the amount jumps from 24,000 to about $31,000 between row 7 and 8. So just know that's a feature, and I'm assuming you're going to use that when you become age 50. You're going to bump up your contribution and contribute more into your 401k plan. So now I'm going to, in the salary column, column F is what I'm assuming your salary is. You've been working for 15 years, you're age 45, so I'm going to put your salary at $135,000. And each year, I'm assuming you're going to get a raise of 3.5%. Sometimes that may be lower, sometimes it's higher. I know inflation is probably more than that, but let's just say 3.5%. So you're going to start off at a salary of 135,000. And then after 10 years, you're going to be at $183,000. So, that's kind of some salary growth. From that, I'm going to assume you're going to live off half of your salary in order to be the super saver. So in column J, I have listed half of the salary, and I'm going to get to that in a minute, but I want to include the company match to your 401k. So in column G, I'm assuming you've got a company that matches, and I'm going to assume they're going to match 6% of your salary. So if you have a $135,000 salary, they're going to add $8,100 into your company match. It's also going to grow at that 7.5% rate. So at the end of a year, you're going to end up with 8,700 or 8,707, and that's column I, row 3. So we're going to sum up all of those because you got to include your company match and what you get into your 401k. So column I shows the previous year added to the next year, and down in the column, your company match is going to end up after 10 years time frame of being $141,000, which is not too bad for free money because remember, this is 100% free money. Your portion of the company match, I'm assuming, is in your contribution. So part of that $23,500 amount on the first year is what you put in. Your company matches 6% of that and gives you $8,100. So after this 10-year time frame where you super matched your contributions into your 401k plan, you are going to end up with a grand total of $865,913.68. So that's a pretty decent amount, and not quite enough to retire on by itself, but it's not bad. And let's say your plan for retirement is to never touch your amount that you have in this account. You've invested it in some dividend paying companies. You're going to withdraw 4% from your account every year, and 4% of that $865,000 amount is $34,636, and that's in column I-15. So every year, you're going to be able to pull out roughly $35,000 out of the account. You are never going to sell stock. You're just going to live on the dividends, and that's going to be part of your ability to retire early. So as I said, it's not enough for you to retire on just using your 401k. And what the reason? Well, okay. So a couple things to think about. This $34,000 is kind of a sweet spot because you do not have to pay taxes on the first amount coming out of your 401k as long as it's under the standard deduction. Now, today it's about $30,000, but I assume by the time 10 years goes by, that's going to be higher. So basically, that $34,000 you're going to pull out every year is going to be tax free. So you put money into this 401k, you didn't pay tax on it, and now you're going to start taking money out of the 401k tax free. So basically, you made at least 12% on every contribution that you had in there. You're not going to pay tax on it coming out. So that's one optimization strategy that you can use. Is money went in tax free, and then as long as it's beneath a certain amount, you can pull it out tax free. I don't know what the standard deduction will be in 10 years time when you turn 55, but we can just guess it'll probably be under that $34,000 amount. So you had a salary of 135,000, but you're going to become a super saver, and you're going to try to live on half your salary, which I list in column J. So the first year you're going to try to cut back, and you're going to live off 67,500 instead of 135,000. So how is that possible? Well, you could have paid off your house in that first 15 years that you were working. Um, you could reduce the expenditures that you have. You know, you've paid off your cars. You are living beneath your means, but somehow you got to figure out how to live on $67,000 a year. Every year your salary went up. So by the time 10 years goes by, you've actually got $91,000 that you're living on. And what we're trying to shoot for is a retirement amount that's close to that wage amount that you've been practicing living on. And we're going to shoot for a retirement income of $100,000. So before, you know, your half salary by the time you reach 55 is $91,995, and you're going to give yourself a raise when you retire. So you're going to have to use your brokerage account in order to retire, because it's not sufficient to just use your 401k to retire. So what I put in column K is the remainder. That's the difference between half of your salary. You subtracted your contribution to your 401k, which is $23,500, and the remainder is $44,000, and you are going to invest that into some stocks and assets that are going to continue to grow. Now, for this hypothetical example, I'm going to say you're going to invest it all in oil pipelines, master limited partnership, midstream companies that are on average paying about 7.5% of a dividend yield, but they're also going to give you a 10 or 2.5% growth rate. And I put the average growth amount at 10%. There's no guarantees that this can happen, but here's a hypothetical example. So again, you're buying master limited partnerships. These are pipeline companies, and or you could just invest it in the S&P 500 for this 10 years too. It's up to you. When you do retire, I am going to put you in those master limited partnerships for some tax purposes, and I'll show you later. So, I guess for this example, let's say you just invest in the S&P 500 and it has a growth rate of 10% in this example. So the first year, you've got a remainder of $44,000. So you're going to save that. It's going to grow. And column L is your growth rate, and column M is how much you are left after. And then each year, you're going to save half your salary, subtract out your 401k contribution, and you're going to save the remainder of that and invest it within your brokerage account. So at the end of that 10-year time frame, you end up with $877,000.89. This is money in your brokerage account. Let's say you had it in the S&P 500 and it was growing at 10%. But in this last year before you retire, you're going to sell all of that and you're going to put it into master limited partnership pipeline stocks. And the reason why you do that is because they pay out dividends or distributions in the form of return of capital. And the reason why that's important is because you also want cheap health care when you retire, or at least for the 10 years time between when you're age 55 to age 65. So I have added both of those two columns together. So the total that's in your 401k is in column I-14, and then the total that you have in M is 877,000. So if you add both of those two together, that summation is column M14. It says you have $1,743,002. So that's the total that you have. You started with a 401k of 150,000. You really ramped up your 401k contributions. You started saving half your salary, and anything that didn't go into your 401k, you put in your brokerage account. And not bad, after 10 years, you've got 1.7 million. So, as I said, you put that into master limited partnerships. They're going to pay on average 7.5% each year. So, the $887,000 that you have in your brokerage account is going to throw off $65,781 in passive return of capital, which is kind of the same thing as dividends. Um, so both of those together, if you sum column I-15 together with column M-15, you're above $100,000 of income that you have to live on. Now, what's interesting is your tax rate and your health care become really cheap, because the standard deduction by that time is probably more than 34,000. So that 34,000 you're going to pull out of your 401k each year. You will pay 0% tax, federal tax, and state tax on that. Well, you might pay state tax on it still, but there will be no federal tax on it. And then because you're getting a return of capital, that 65,000 in column M, you're also going to pay 0% taxes on. So you're going to have a really, really low tax rate for 10 years. And the 10 years time is about how long it takes for your master limited partnerships to completely pay back all the distributions. It's reduced your basis of your cost basis down to zero. And at that point, then your dividends start to count for your taxes. Or if you sell your shares, you're going to have 100% capital gains on all of those stocks, or the partnership funds. But what's interesting is your MAGI, or modified adjusted gross income, for the Obamacare or the ACA insurance program is going to look really low. So because you've pulled $34,000 out of your 401k, that's going to be the basis for your income for that year, which is going to make you look really poor. So you have to make sure you earn above what the Medicaid amount is. I don't know what it'll be in the future, but you got to be above Medicaid. But as long as you're low, you're going to get a lot of subsidies for that. So it looks like you have $34,000 in income. The $65,000 does not count as income because it's return of capital, and it just doesn't show up at all. So you're going to get maximum subsidies on Obamacare for 10 years' time. It's going to be really cheap. You're going to pay 0% tax on that $34,000. And that's a 10-year plan of something you can do over time. Now, when you turn 65, you're going to get Medicare. At that point, you can decide, hey, I want to sell some of my partnerships and harvest some capital gains, or maybe you just want to hold on to those for the rest of your life forever. Or you might want to spend down some of your 401k plan. So you can kind of use some tax advantage there. You can, pull some of those funds out from age 65 to 70 while your Social Security, continues to accrue. Try to spend down your 401k so that your RMDs get minimized, and that's a potential tax strategy. So, again, this is just a hypothetical situation to say, if you are in a decent career but you want to retire 10 years earlier, you want to get out of there at age 55. This is one method to get out of there early, have all the income that you need, also have a really low tax rate, and it's just a potential for something that could work for you. And I wanted to do this as an experiment. Let me know if you find this interesting, if you'd like me to do these things again. Again, this is just a hypothetical situation, and as an engineer, I look at spreadsheets and numbers all the time. They make perfect sense to me. I kind of like looking at them and planning. And I did something like this myself 10 years ago when I'm like, I want to get out of this job. How much do I really need to save in order to have enough to retire on? And I made some plans, and over the past decade, I have been saving, really ramped up my personal savings between what I put into the 401k, IRA systems, and also my personal brokerage account. So these are all some interesting thoughts. Again, hopefully this was helpful to you. Let me know if you like this kind of video, and I'll do some more of these in the future. We'll see you. Like, subscribe. Bye.